Hey guys, thank you for joining me on another video. Um, I'm gonna try to do better, but no promises. I, this month, October, amongst other things, is known for domestic violence awareness. Well, here's the thing most people, unless they live under a rock or a deserted island, are aware of domestic violence. They may not be aware of the statistics, such as 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 7 people end up in the ER because of domestic violence. Um, so they may not be aware of those statistics, but they're there. And to make it more impactful, think about this, that 1 in 3 women or 1 in 4 men could be your brother, your aunt, your uncle, cousin, your best friend. It could be anybody, any walk of life, any demographic. The myth is that it's mostly low income families, and though it is common to hear about that, it goes over all demographics, including the monetarily wealthy. It's just not talked about as much for reasons that may sound cynical, but they have money, so people don't pay much attention to that part. And, it is what it is. But it impacts, you know, everybody, because it could be a relative or a friend. It impacts the children. My children were horribly affected by me staying in this abusive marriage for 32 years. I left at 32 years and I should have left a minimum of 13 years prior. Minimum. Looking back, probably more than that, but at best, I should have stayed gone back in '07 when I called the police on my ex the first time. And people say, well, not my problem. Is it though? Because tax dollars not only go to the nonprofits that help the victims, it goes to the jails to house the perpetrators. And again, if you're a family member of a victim, doesn't it affect you that way? It affects everybody in its path. And people don't think about that. It takes a lot for a victim to leave. Sadly, if they ever leave. Some never get the courage to leave. Not everybody was blessed as I was, where I had the support. My family, my mom and my sister, day one, they were right there. When when I finally told my mom that she could tell the rest of my family, her brothers and sisters, I'll never forget. I got messages pretty much as soon as they hung up the phone with my mother. I was getting a message, hey baby, I'm proud of you. I'm right here. If you need to talk, I'm here. And it still gets me teary eyed because um, I thought I was all alone. And that I was the black sheep of the family, which I kind of am for different reasons. But my family still loved me, and my family was right there for me. But not all victims have that luxury, and it is a luxury. Because I honestly believe that that made the difference with me. Because I deal with victims all the time at work. And it would take the state stepping in, removing their children because it was unsafe for the children, for the victims to even consider leaving. Unfortunately, sometimes not even then, because they're not ready, because they're scared, because they're isolated, because they have no support system, because they know that any support they get from the state is temporary. So they know that once the state's out of it, that's it, it's gone. And that's scary, which it is. And if you have been abused for as long as some of these victims are, because this abuse doesn't just start when they were with this person, either by marriage or just living with them or whatever. It started way before. Because it's rare that a victim of domestic abuse, that this is the first time, that chances are they were groomed somewhere. Not always, I'm not saying it's definitive, but more often than not, they had some sort of background in emotional abuse. In my case, I was emotionally abused and physically abused by my biological father, to the point that when I started getting abused by my now ex, it was so subtle I didn't even realize it. It wasn't until, oh gosh, I couldn't even tell you. I think like the last 2 or 3 years, I started finally considering it abuse. Partially because I didn't want to admit it, because I had other things, dealing with other beliefs and things like that. Not to mention, if I admitted that I was being abused, I would have to admit that I'm a loser. Didn't know that, no, I'm not a loser. It took a lot of courage to leave. The day I left him, I was fighting with myself. all the way from leaving my apartment to the grocery store where I parked to get on my cell phone and call the police. I fought with myself. I was fighting with myself as if I was fighting with another person. You gotta do this, you gotta do this. I can't, I'm scared. What if it's really not that bad? What if they can't? All sorts of things. And so, but there are those that don't have that support. I knew that I would have the support of my mother and my sister. I knew if nothing else, I would have their support. And others don't. So we need things like the battered women's shelters, and victims advocacy centers and things like that. That needs to be there, and that impacts us because our tax dollars go to it one way or the other. Um, could we get to the point of eradicating domestic violence? No. This is a broken world, and there's always going to be violence in some form or fashion. But bringing awareness to it can help break the cycle, help victims realize that, okay, I am a victim and I'm not alone. That's why I do these videos, as sporadic as they've been over the past year. That's why I do them. That's why I started them. Because I knew that I wasn't the only one. I started knowing after I looked up a few things on internet, on like Instagram, and of course that algorithm stuff kept popping up and popping up, and I started learning more. But unless you look it up, it's not really going to come in, under your radar. I didn't think of myself as a domestic abuse victim. Now I think of myself as a DV survivor, but I didn't think I was a victim of abuse. And I didn't think it was this common. Unfortunately, it is. I knew there was places I could go to get help, but I didn't know how to achieve them. But the biggest thing is I felt like I was stupid for falling for him, for allowing myself to be the victim. And that's what I want to bring awareness. A victim is not stupid for becoming the victim. They didn't set out to be a victim. They started this relationship with a person that essentially didn't exist. Just like me. The person I married was not a person that existed. My ex, I have said this often, my ex acted like he came out of a Hallmark movie or out of some chick flick movie. That's how he acted. He knew all the right things to say, swept me off my feet, treated me like gold, made me think I was the only one in his eyes. After we got divorced, or after I left him, I started realizing that I was definitely not the only one in his eyes. I know now that he cheated on me several times. I suspect one of them was with a family friend, or it could be potentially two of them, two different family friends. I don't know definitely, but I suspect highly. Um, and the abuse didn't start until we were married about 2.5 years, and it was subtle. It was so subtle that I didn't even realize it was abuse. I look back now and realize that it was, but I didn't then. And that's what, that's pretty common. Because it was, and I didn't even realize it was abuse for many, many years. By the time I realized it was abuse, like basically like a frog in hot water, it was too late. I didn't admit to myself of the abuse until about a few years before I left. I had blamed myself. I was stupid. I was a loser. I'm worthless. All of these things running through my head. And though part of me knew better, the part of me that had zero self-esteem or negative self-esteem went out. But through it all, I had support. So many victims don't. And men, it's even harder because it's automatically assumed the woman, that someone will believe a woman has been abused over a man being abused. And because there's all kinds of stigma involved in that. And these women can be ruthless. Just because they may not be able to overpower a man, there's emotional abuse that, in my opinion, emotional abuse is worse because they get into your head and, oh man, it's hard to get out of it. It's hard to undo all of that damage. I'm still undoing the damage that was done to me 4.5 years later. Admittedly, there's a lot of damage from my father and from other guys I dated over the years before I met my ex. But it's a long process. And people don't realize the impact that it has. It has an impact on the victim, obviously. It has an impact on the children, the families, and people who have never had anyone, that has never known anyone that has been a victim. Because by way of, like I said, tax dollars. And what we really need to look at is how it impacts things, and think about what we can do to at least make a little bit of a change. If we can prevent one child from being removed from their home, that's an impact in a positive way. if we can prevent one victim from being killed by their abuser, that's an impact in a positive way. If we can prevent a family of single mother and children from having to stay at a homeless shelter because they have nowhere to go, that's impact. If we can just be a friend and be there for the person, even if we can't give them a place to stay, even if we can't give them any money because we're strapped ourselves, we're just there as a friend, not judging, not trying to fix things, but to just be a listening ear. That's an impact. So I'll close out this with asking you a question. What kind of impact are you going to make to prevent further abuse? God bless, and have a good week.